Hey guys, what's up? I'm back with another video today. Some quick updates. Buddy of mine started sending me some stuff from the new Ravnica set coming out because once I heard we were going back to Ravnica, I just didn't really care about spoilers. But apparently, in accordance with the last video talking about better mana bases, they are giving us a cycle for each of the different guilds, a full 10 cycle of new fetchable lands that come into play tapped, and you can also surveil one. If you're new here, the surveil mechanic means you get to look at the top card of your library or the top X cards, depending on what the surveil number is, and put them back in any order or any number of them into your graveyard. So that's really useful for sculpting your deck, potentially sculpting your graveyard if you're a graveyard player, so on and so forth. The second update for you guys is, so I had a sign or a placard commissioned. I don't know if you guys can see it all that well for the channel. Since this is Cardboard Kitchen, today we're going to be going over something a little bit spicy. So this is the rules of the kitchen. It's not the best to see, but all of this was wood burnt. I have a buddy who does wood burnings. He's actually fairly talented at it for the most part. Just want to give him a quick shout out. Maybe in the future get some other stuff done. Talk to him, see if he can set something up in case you guys want to have anything wood burnt. But topic of today is infect players and the poison mechanic, which is rule number 1 of the kitchen, and that is the infect player dies first. So I don't particularly care for the poison mechanic in Commander. In other formats, I think it's a decent mechanic. It's a good mechanic. It's a somewhat well-rounded mechanic. The infect mechanic was extremely strong when it originally came out, and I believe at one point Wizards of the Coast even came out with an apology to the player base over the infect mechanic because it was a whole lot stronger than what they had initially thought. Which is understandable. They've done that a few times over the course since I've been playing. Which, in some cases, it was well-founded and well-meant and well-earned, being the case with Infect. The Infect mechanic as a whole states that a creature with Infect deals damage to other creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters. It also states that if this creature deals combat damage to a player, it deals it in the form of poison counters. Now, poison is a unique mechanic in the game of Magic the Gathering. For anybody who's new, it gives the poison mechanic, it gives the individual player poison counters. And whenever an individual player achieves 10 poison counters, that player loses the game. However, in your normal constructed formats where it's like a 1v1 constructed format, both players start with 20 life. So 10 points of poison damage being half of your starting life total, it's a little bit easier to get to 10 than it is to 20 in terms of damage, so to speak. But in a format like your 1v1 constructed format or your two-headed giant format, so the two-headed giant is a team-based format where two players work as a team to defeat another team, which is run by two players. In the two-headed giant format, each team starts with 30 life, but the infect count or the poison count in two-headed giant is 15, so it's still half. My issue with this poison mechanic, this infect mechanic, is strictly for the Commander format. And my issue is that the number is still 10 in Commander. And a lot of people, and this is where this video is probably going to get a little controversial for a lot of people, a lot of people will argue that 10 is still a good number and that 10 is a fair number because an infect player or a person playing poison in Commander might be able to kill one, maybe two players with 10 poison counters apiece, but not the entirety of the opposing table. And that's where I have to disagree personally, based on experience and based on stuff that I've seen come out in recent years, like the past 2 or 3, 4 years, something like that. So the big reason I disagree, starting from experience, is what happens when you sit at a table and you're the only person at the table not playing poison. or not playing infect, you're the first person to die, because everybody else understands that you're the player who's going to target or disrupt everything they're trying to do, because they want to play a shorter game that's a little more damage-based, fast-paced kind of deal. So you're usually the first player that dies. And they've all effectively got an unspoken rule of, our life totals are effectively 10. That's fine. It's a faster game. We don't particularly care. And my big issue with that is all the other formats where it matters, where the poison count matters for an alternate win, in all those other formats, it's half the starting life total of the player or the team, not a fourth. In Commander, you start with 40 life, and your poison count is still 10. So each point of poison is equivalent to 4 actual damage, or 4 life points, instead of the other formats where it's equivalent to 2. In the formats where it's equivalent for 2, I still think that that's fair in those formats. It's essentially trying to speed up the game in an alternate way. In Commander, I understand it's trying to speed up a game in an alternate way. But, again, if you're the only person sitting at a table at a Commander pod, and you're the only person not playing Infect, you have the highest chance of dying first to Infect. You also have the lowest chance of winning. Speaking from personal experience, I've sat at numerous tables where I was the only person not playing Infect because I didn't particularly like the mechanic. And I was always the first person to die, because it would get to the point where I would be the one I'm going to kill this creature, I'm going to bounce this, I was literally using resources early on to deal with problematic Infect creatures. And when the other players realized that, like, I was kind of just preventing them from trying to win the game as fast as possible, it quickly became a 3-on-1, which is a different format style. And more specifically, it was a 3-on-1 in a format where you don't typically build a deck to be able to handle a 3-on-1. You don't ever build or design your decks in a manner to literally say, I'm going to be able to, regardless of what happens in the game, I'm going to be able to deal with all 3 players whenever I absolutely need to. That's not something you do. That's not something you can deck build for, really in any format, especially when there's a multiplayer version of that format out. It's not entirely possible. Now, you can get really close to that. You can build your decks to, in ways, slow down other people, but it's not going to, you're not going to really fully be able to build a single deck that plays one of options to deal with all other players at the table. And it gets harder when you get into larger pods. And a lot of you might be thinking, well, why would you ever play in a pod with more than 4 or more than 5? And I'll go ahead and tell you right now, as somebody who's played in a 12-person pod, yes, you heard that correct, I played in a 12-person pod. If you're not prepared, if you don't have things at your lower mana values to deal with threats or deal with problems, I sat in a 12-person pod for 4 hours. It was the only game we got in that night for 4 hours. I did not get to see turn 3. I did not get to see my turn 3. I saw turn 1, which was draw, play a land, that unfortunately came into play tapped. I saw turn number 2, which was draw, play a land that came into play untapped, play a Soul Ring, and then have nothing else to do and pass the turn, and I never got to see turn 3. I never got to make it to turn 3. The game, somebody else in the rotation of the 12 players, over the course of however long it took for the person going after me to whenever it got to that player's turn, was just doing so much that I never got to see my third turn of this 12-person pod. So when you start playing more people in your pods, I've seen a lot of people that will very easily play 5-man pods. Well, now your opponent number increases by 1. And if that player is also playing Infect, your odds drastically reduce in winning even further. And I've seen some people who, if you're willing to alter, like play with The planes chase stuff, if you're willing to play with the planes chase stuff, I've seen people play pods of 6 and 7. I've played in a pod of 12. I've played in a pod of 10. Both of these pods were just straight commander. Both of these pods took so long that it was the only game we got the entire night. And it's really unfun when you play in those larger pods to not be able to see turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, and actually be able to do anything. And again, I'm running my mouth essentially in talking about things that are not the topic. The topic is infect and poison. But just to give you an idea of where some of my experience comes from on stuff that I've seen, stuff that I've dealt with. If you're the only person at the table not playing infect, your chances of winning are, in my personal opinion, below 0 or below 1%. It's like 0.0 some number percent. It's never a full 0 and it's never a full 100, but your odds are drastically reduced for each opponent you have playing infect. Especially if you if you're the first player to try and deal with threats that the infect player is playing, you immediately become usually their sole focus. That being said, the other reason I have an issue with infect in the commander format, and this is where I hope that somebody from the rules committee or the subcommittee or whatever that deals with the commander rules is kind of listening here. Another issue that I have is that it's tracked cumulatively, meaning it doesn't matter if you have one opponent that's playing infect or 30 opponents that's playing infect. If all of them hit you, it's all tracked on the same, essentially the same gauge that tracks poison counters, which is that you only need 10 cumulatively, meaning if you have 3 opponents and they're all playing some form of poison or infect, one of them deals you 3, another one deals you 3, well, the next one only has to deal you 4, and then you're dead. Because it's not tracked separately, it's tracked cumulatively. And one of the issues I have with this is actually also in a parallel conjunction with the commander damage. Commander damage is tracked separately from each individual commander, but poison counters are not. Poison counters are tracked cumulatively. However, I personally feel like one of two changes needs to be made. Either the change of 21 commander damage cumulatively, meaning it's just 21 commander damage in total, should be a change, and that would be on par with the way you track poison counters, and it would be just as much threatening. And a lot of players are probably not going to like that. Here's an alternative to that, and the alternative to that is track poison counters from individual opponents. So, yes, I need a total of 10, but I need 10 from opponent X, or opponent Y, or opponent Z, not 10 combined from opponent X, Y, and Z. I really feel like that would help things a lot more, because then so I understand that the infect mechanic, the poison mechanic, is not widely seen in Commander really that much or at all, and it's understandable why maybe a lot of people don't agree with what I'm saying as far as making these rules changes or things of that nature. But if you guys ever wanted to experience something from what I'm talking about, sit down at a table where you're the only person not playing infect, and see how that works out for you. Another thing is, I used to play at a local store here where I'm from. It was called Hickory Cards Comics and Games. Unfortunately, they're no longer open. They did have to shut their doors due to recession issues and everything of that nature. But they had a special in-house rule, which was it took 20 points of poison to kill a player. And the reason I find this unique is I hear all the time, well, it's impossible for one person playing infect or one person playing poison to deal 10 points to each opponent or get 10 points on each opponent in order to kill them. And I'm here to tell you, again, from personal experience, I put 20 points on 3 opponents in one game of poison counters while at that store to kill them with poison. I managed to do it. It was tough. It was difficult. It was very problematic in some situations. But I did it. Meaning, it's not impossible. It takes a little bit longer than 10. And more importantly, I did it when I was the only poison player at the table. So, if I can do it, I know you guys can do it. And I know that I'm just one person who did it. Meaning, there are far more people out there playing infect or poison, or want to play infect or poison, and are constantly told that it's not worth it. That it's entirely possible. It can be done. And again, personal opinion coming from experience, things that I've done, things that I've seen done, games that I've seen. Yeah, infect players should die first. Person playing poison or infect or whatever mechanic their choice, whether it's toxic or any of the other ones, you should probably die first, in my personal opinion. Especially if the entire theme of your deck is centered around doing that. Because I just don't like it. And I feel like you as a player should be the first to leave the table. Now, I'm probably a little biased on that. I've played Standard when Infect was in Standard. I've played Modern when Infect was huge in Modern. Infect's still popular in Modern, but I don't see it. I don't see it as often as you see other lists. You know, when Infect was in Standard, the Infect deck in Standard was basically the top 95% of that time frame for Standard, which was problematic because it made a lot of people hate the Infect mechanic, myself included. And I say that being someone who contributed to that top 95 percentile, but I contributed because I hated the mechanic so much that I specifically went out and built the deck in order to play it so that other people could hate it, so that other people could understand why I don't think it was a good deck. I don't think it was something that should have lasted as long as it did. I don't think it's something that a lot of people, especially in today's age as far as Magic is concerned, understand how problematic it can be. But yeah, my opinions, my advice for anyone on the rules committee who might be listening, or the subcommittee who might be listening, or even somebody at Wizards who might be listening. Two options for rules changes in Commander. Either make it so that commander damage is tracked cumulatively from all commanders, or make it so that the poison count is tracked from each individual opponent separately. Saying you still need 10, but have it be 10 from an individual opponent. And I do mean opponent, not necessarily just creatures that player owns. Because there are decks out there that will be like, oh, I'm going to play an Act of Treason or an Act of Treason effect and gain control of a creature somebody else owns for the turn and then smack you with it. And it's like, well, it's technically that player's creature, so it would be tracked on there. Like, no. Any creature controlled by the player who is attacking you. So even if you take somebody else's creature, if you're attacking me with somebody else's creature, it counts as your attacking creature and gets tracked under a separate tracker from you. I feel like those are your... There are probably other options out there that I haven't thought of yet, but I feel like those are your best current options. Predominantly because I don't want to see commander damage be tracked cumulatively. I've played games where if you track it cumulatively, you're dead really quickly. Like, you're just flat out dead by turn like 5. Just because maybe you don't want to give up your own commander, or maybe their commanders hit super hard and have trample and you don't have blockers or something. You know, whatever the case may be. Like, you you could be dead rather quickly if you make the change for cumulative commander damage being tracked as just commander damage as a whole. But I feel like that would be fair if you don't change the way poison is tracked in Commander. Or at least increase. I guess there is a third alternative. Increase the poison count to 20, which was, for the longest time, my biggest argument is every other format that tracks poison, it's always half your starting life total, except in Commander. Commander, it's still just 10, which is a fourth of your life total. But again, playing from experience and dealing with being the only person in a pod to not have infect, not play poison, and not have anything to deal with any of that stuff, it's a problem. It's not fun. It's never fun. Again, options are track commander damage cumulatively, not individual commanders, or change the poison count in Commander to 20, which it would be half of your starting life total, which for the longest time is what I really felt it would be, or should be, and kind of still do, but I'm willing to accept the cumulative commander damage, or this third option, which is track poison from individual opponents. I really feel like those are changes that need to be made for the Commander format very soon, very quickly, unless, of course, I'm just some, dude who's played for 24 years who apparently might not know what he's talking about. But, hey, I've seen a lot come about in the history of Magic. When I started playing, Planeswalkers weren't a card type. Mythic wasn't a rarity. Damage still went on the stack. A lot of people making those jokes on on other pages and stuff. But when I started playing, damage still went on the stack. On top of that, you still took mana burn. Like, that's a rule that they've done away with. Like, you don't take mana burn anymore. So I've seen a lot of changes in the game, and I know there are some of the people that I used to play with that are still playing, they've probably seen more changes in the game than I have, and I've been playing for roughly 24 years. When Planeswalkers first came out, they originally showed up in the original Lorwyn run. They were rares only, and they had 1 uptick and 2 downticks, and depending on what the uptick and the middle ability was usually a way to protect itself in some manner, with the exception of the original Liliana. Her downtick was a tutor, which was probably the strongest downtick of the original ones, with the exception of the original Jace, which was -1, target player draws a card, which you would just target yourself. Also, if I remember correctly, the original Jace was the only Planeswalker out of the original 5 that had a +2 ability. It was a +2, everybody draws a card. So because because you're giving everybody a card, you get the 1 extra point of loyalty. Just some of the changes that I've seen, you don't take mana burn anymore. Damage doesn't go on the stack anymore. Planeswalkers weren't a thing when I started playing, but now they are a thing. The mythic rarity wasn't a thing when I started playing, but it became a thing. Here's a big change that I remember. They used to be called fat packs, not bundles. And you used to get, so like you can probably see some of these over here on the side. In each fat pack, which was $34.99 retail, you got 2 boxes to store your cards. 1 box had a set D20, a few packs, and some lands. And the other box came with a novel that was written based on whatever set the fat pack was from. So that was something else that's changed. They don't do the novels anymore, or if they do, they don't They don't advertise them the way that they did. Like, I thought that that was really ingenious originally, was, hey, we're making a product for a game that we make, and there's lore to this game. So why don't we include a copy of this particular world's lore or story that comes in a book that we're going to sell anyway in one of the products? They stopped doing that. You get one box to store your stuff in now. You don't get the novel. Oh, that was something else that they stopped doing. So the big box that it used to come in that held both of them, like the big package that held both of the boxes, used to have really good artwork that you could unfold the whole thing, and you could like have it as kind of like before they started making fabric-based wall scrolls. It was essentially a wall scroll. It had artwork from the set that you could just unfold and put up on your wall, similar to that of a wall scroll. It also came with a book that had a copy that showed what every card was in the set. They don't do that anymore either. Again, I'm kind of jumping around all around in this video. But yes, as far as the changes that I've seen over the years in Magic, I feel like the change to the poison count for Commander is not only a viable change that needs to happen, but a change that should have happened when the format became a recognized format and they started making products for the Commander format instead of strictly just calling it Elder Dragon Highlander, which is what it originally was. That being said, just to reiterate, one of the changes you could make is change the poison count to 20 instead of it just being 10. Or you could change the Commander track damage to 21 cumulatively, because then it makes Commander damage just as problematic as the poison count. Or you could track poison count from individual players. You could keep it 10 but track it from individual players. The big reason these last two are options is because I feel like that puts them on the same. They are both equally as dangerous, in my personal opinion, because they're alternate ways to essentially kill a player that don't involve dealing massive amounts of damage at once, or forcing them to draw their deck plus more cards than they have in their deck, or something of that nature. The other thing is, there is no way to remove Commander damage in a game of Commander. There are ways in Commander to remove poison counters. There's one card that will do it, that will actively remove the counters. And then there's another card that's a Planeswalker that will let you restart the game, that also technically removes the counters. Because if you restart the game, you start the game as if you didn't have those counters. So there are two cards in the format that will do it, one of which is a sorcery, I think. You lose 2 life for every poison counter you remove from yourself as a player. So there are 2 ways to remove the counters. There are a few ways to just make sure you don't get the counters, but there's those are fantastic ways, but you can't play all of these things that I'm saying or talking about in every possible deck, because most of these cards have colors and color combinations that require you to play specific color combinations in order to put them in your deck. But Commander damage, you can't remove Commander damage. Once you get 21 Commander damage from an individual commander, you lose the game, regardless of what your life total is, regardless of whether or not you have an effect other than an effect that says you can't lose the game. And the reason this is important is because there is a card that has an effect that states your life total can't change. It doesn't say that you can't lose the game, it just says your life total can't change. So any effect that says you can't lose will prevent you from losing. But there is no way to remove Commander damage. Commander damage is similar to poison counters on a player or emblems that a player gets. It's It's a potential source of threat that a player has to track or have hold of, because a player does not count as a permanent that nothing can interact with. There are things that can increase the damage that your commander does, but once you have commander damage, you can't remove it. Just things of that nature. If you made commander damage track cumulatively, it becomes as threatening as poison counters are. And don't get me wrong, poison counters are still threatening. Even when there's one person at the table playing poison, poison counters are still threatening, even though the count is only 10. So I feel like you could either increase the poison count requirement to 20 for commander, because then it would be on par for every other format that plays the poison mechanic, which is you need half of your starting life total. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, talking about, it's virtually impossible. Again, I've played games where I was the only person at a table that did not play infect or poison, and I was always the first person to die. Or you could have commander damage track cumulatively. It makes commander damage more threatening than it currently is, because 21 points from an individual commander is still a problem, but some commanders, like if you play a planeswalker as your commander, you're never going to deal that person 21 points of commander damage unless you play the equipment that turns your planeswalker into a creature. But for the most part, you're probably not going to have to worry about commander damage from that particular player because they're playing a planeswalker as their commander. Players who play creatures that are commanders that are low in power, 1 or 2 or 3, it's still going to take them a while. It's still possible. It's still predominantly going to take them a while, though. A creature with power 3 that's your commander, assuming it hits you every single time it swings at you, still takes a minimum of 7 swings. So whatever turn you can play it, plus 7 additional turns. So you effectively have 8 turns. Once it hits the board, you effectively have 7-ish turns to deal with it before you really have to worry. Or make the poison track, because again, I feel like poison counters and commander damage are kind of on the same page as problematic aspects of the commander format. So I feel like if you change commander damage to be tracked cumulatively, or change poison count to be tracked from individual players or individual opponents, I feel like that puts them on the same track as far as how threatening they really are. 10 points cumulatively from your opponents is not only threatening, it's very, very possible. It's highly possible, a whole lot faster than most players would really think or understand. So if you tracked the poison damage, or the poison number, poison counters from individual opponents separately rather than just 10 cumulatively, that kind of makes poison equivalent to how you track commander damage. And I really feel like both poison and commander damage are on the same level as threats as far as issues you have to deal with. And really, that's kind of where I'm at with the whole poison infects issue in Commander, and that's my opinion on it. So I really hope you liked the video. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Hit the notification bell to be notified whenever I upload more videos. Again, I'll try and crack these out as soon as I have an idea or a topic or free time. One of these. As soon as one of these comes to me in the ability to be able to record these and get these posted, I get these recorded and posted. Again, would like to see 1,000 likes on this video and my first video by the end of February. Would love to see 1,000 subscribers by the end of February. I know that you guys can do it. I've seen you do it. I know it's possible. So let's get it done.